Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Phyllis Thompson and the Women's Studies program for having me here, for organizing this series. I'm really honored to be here with you all today and to talk to you a little bit about what I do here at ETSU and what I've learned over the years in making dances. So while I'm talking, I think I'd like to divert your attention as well. So, so check out some slides here as well. So get that going if I can. Okay. Here at ETSU, I am charged with directing and choreographing musicals and any movement sequences needed in plays, so I often get to visit someone else's play and just come and see what they've been working on and maybe help enhance their movement a bit. So this makes for really diverse creative experiences, and I often jump around quite a bit from genre to genre, which is a lot of fun. Just last semester I was learning about, a good English jig, and that was something that I had never done before. Without that opportunity, I wouldn't have got to study and learn more about that, so that was a lot of fun. But I think perhaps the most challenging choreographic experiences I have is choreographing for a dance concert setting. That means I have a completely blank slate. There's no script. There's no score, no music, nothing. So I've got about 90 minutes to fill. So what am I gonna do? The first thing I do is ask for help right away. But I begin the choreographic process by embracing the premise that dance is innate. We are born with the ability to dance. I think it was Jacques d'Amboise who said, even in our mother's womb, we're rocking and rolling to the rhythm of her heartbeat. This is my mantra. And I return to this idea whenever I feel doubtful. Dance is innate. We are born with the ability to dance. We all have within us ways in which our body enjoys moving. Some of us have had years of dance training, so moving within a codified construct feels good to us. The dance technique is our comfort zone. Others may not have any dance training at all, so they haven't tamed their bodies, so to speak. When entering a dance studio, both of these movers have certain advantages. The dancer with a lot of training has intimate knowledge of what works on their body, but the untrained dancer might be more receptive or open to movement that doesn't fall into any kind of dance genre or category, maybe something a little bit more outside of the box. Both have obstacles to overcome when they enter the studio. How does that trained dancer open themselves up to new and innovative movement without relying so heavily on what they already know works? And how does that untrained dancer work towards a dance aesthetic when needed? So this is a choreographic, I don't want to say problem, but problem that I really enjoy exploring. And frankly, this conundrum, it was born out of necessity. Here I am, I have some students who have tons of training and some students who don't have any training, and I'm thinking, okay, how are we gonna work together? And what I've actually discovered with that is they have things to teach each other. So when I'm working a lot with actors and movers, they're there to collaborate with the dancers to talk about the motivation behind the movement. When I'm working with dancers who have a lot of technique, they're there to help teach the technique. And so if we all can embrace Jacques Lessig's ideals of openness, togetherness, and playfulness, we can come up with something that's going to engage the audience. So that right there is something very exciting, and I often seek this out now. So, I want to get this group of people together. I think this is gonna make for a really interesting mix. So once I have the cast, I can get to the work of actually making the dance. Making dances for the stage, also known as choreography or dance composition, is a varied and complex process. Sometimes it feels as though a dance just comes to mind. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, like when you're driving in your car and you're listening to the radio and you can just sort of see the dance a little bit. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. It makes me miss my exit. But that spark of inspiration is awesome, but it's not something that we can rely on because there are deadlines that we have to keep, and that deadline is opening night, of course. So when I have an idea about a dance, but not a whole lot more than that, I turn to the craft of choreography. So I'd like to speak to you now about two dances that I choreographed for a concert setting where improvisational structures and self-imposed constraints with regard to time, space, and energy, which are the elements of dance, time, space, and energy, by adding in obstacles, like actually manufacturing obstacles with regard to time, space, and energy, that actually guided much of the choreographic process. So the first dance I'd like to tell you about is called The Physics of a Teardrop. The inspiration for the dance began with my son, Harry. He was 3 years old when we noticed one eye started to turn in slightly every now and again. So my husband and I took him to the optometrist where they discovered he was in need of glasses. That one eye was significantly weaker than the other. So in addition to needing a very strong prescription for his glasses, he also needed to patch the weaker eye. Now, that was just for a few hours daily, but it was enough. The doctor said it was good that we caught this early, as left untreated, it could cause the weaker eye to grow weaker and weaker, leaving the stronger eye to make up for the difference. It can even cause blindness in the eye for some children. When I tell you this story now, I realize that it's not a particularly unusual tale. Lots of children require glasses, after all. But at the time, I felt terrified. So many questions ran through my brain. Did he always have poor eyesight? Did he spend the first 3 years of his little life only seeing in a blur? Should I have caught this sooner? Or is this something that was only just starting? Will the children at his school tease him for needing a patch? He's so young. Will he even wear the glasses, let alone a patch? When alone, I would cover one of my eyes to see what it was like for him. This made me cry a lot. By the way, he loves his glasses. The kids at school thought he was so cool for wearing his patch. Like I had absolutely nothing to worry about. But what was I going to do with all of this pent-up emotion? I'm gonna go to the studio. I'm gonna work it out. So that's what I did. I went to the studio and began working with this gesture, the hand covering the eye, and with the idea of tears falling from the eye. Then I asked myself, how many ways can I physicalize the act of crying? Once I felt I exhausted every aspect of crying, the shape and quality of a tear, what it would look like if I physicalized weeping with other parts of the body, say my elbow, for example, the shuddering shoulders when sobbing, the breath as it holds back the tears, and so on. And through extension, expansion, and connection of these movements together, the beginning of a dance started to take shape. I then put to use the choreographic device of canon, and that's people performing the same movement one after the other, to represent the falling of tears one after the other. I then narrowed my perspective. I wanted to study a specific moment in time when we feel a lump in the throat and a tear rising to the surface, and we ask ourselves, should I really let go and allow the emotion to flow, or do I hold back and only permit myself to let a single tear fall? By thinking of the physical properties of the teardrop, rather than the emotion leading to the teardrop, I found the tears themselves created cold and mysterious shapes. The dancers became the embodiment of a teardrop. And it wasn't until the climax of the dance that the dancers became the person actually crying. It surprised me that what began as a need to release myself from the fear I was experiencing with my son evolved into a crisp, cold, chilling sort of dance. When I think of my son, I feel such warmth. But by narrowing the focus of the dance and imposing the choreographic device of canon, which was a self-imposed constraint that I strictly adhered to, the dance became its own thing. I took myself out of it at some point in the choreographic process, which I think was a good thing for this particular dance. So I will take a moment now to show it to you, all things going well here. Let's see. Don't know if we have much sound, but we'll show a bit of it. So this is when they transition into the person crying. So that was Eva alum and Kelsey Nichols and Maggie Hines performing, and we were at Northern Kentucky University performing that. The sound was a bit low, but it was kind of interesting to actually watch it without too much sound. But the music is from the soundtrack to The Social Network. So if you could kind of hear it a little bit, it's a bit more noisy than it is musical, actually. So. The second dance I'd like to talk to you about now is called A Line in the Sand. I really wanted to challenge the choreographic process by confining myself in terms of space and time. I decided we would work within a square shape. We imagined that the dancers were standing outside a square that was outlined with sand. So like I was imagining us like in the desert or something. Outlined with sand. At one point, I thought we would actually use sand, but practicality won over. But it was nice to dream. So after creating a constraint with space, I also wanted to play around with stillness and slow motion. So I wanted to explore the challenge of still engaging the audience through continuous controlled movement. There's only really once in the dance where they actually move at a fast clip. The rest of the time is pretty slow. Thematically, I was thinking in terms of questioning, do the dancers cross the line in the sand in their relationships, which often requires a good deal of compromise, or do they retreat to their own island, their own way of doing things? So it was this back and forth of making and breaking bonds that we were exploring. I had the basic outline of the dance, which was really quite simple, but I wanted to reach out to visual art to help us create those moments of stillness. I chose a handful of abstract sculptures and brought pictures of the sculptures to the dancers, and together we embodied the pictures as best we could. Now, probably no one would look at those dancers in situ and see any resemblance to the actual sculptures, but it was a great way to get us moving in a way that was outside of ourselves. So it was really fun to use that for inspiration. I can easily say, had I not constrained myself in terms of space and time, the dance would be completely different. So let's take a look at it. And this actually is a good example of a real mishmash of levels in terms of training. So and let's see if you can figure out who it was. Two of the dancers had no training prior to ETSU. One of them had about a year, and another had years and years and years of training. So see if you can spot. This actually starts in silence, so. That was Casey Crawford and Brock Cooley and Hannah Hash and Jenna Middlebrooks performing there. So just to wrap up, my aim when choreographing for a concert setting is to free the dancer's natural body, to open them to internal and external stimuli, to focus on the now while acknowledging what has come before and appreciating what may lie ahead, and to establish a sense of ease and focus when moving. I like to analyze movement that we often take for granted, that we consider habitual and that is common to all of us. And through extension and expansion of habitual movement, I hope to cultivate artistic expression by creating abstract dance gestures. And I hope that these gestures can be felt and related to by the audience on a primal level. They might not know exactly where that gesture came from, but that it somehow sparks something within them that they can recognize. For the audience, they can interpret and engage with the movement however they want to. And hopefully, the dance is empowering and cathartic for the viewer. I am fascinated by the moving body as an instrument for expression, and I feel like it's a lifelong romance for sure. But I do want to say a quote from Martha Graham that I really feel like captures what it is to be a maker of art better than anything I could ever say. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You have to keep yourself open and aware to the urges that motivate you. Keep the channel open. No artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There is only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others. So legend has it that she was at a dinner with Agnes DeMille, who just had huge success with her choreography of Oklahoma. And DeMille was fretting because she thought that that wasn't her best work, that she had done a whole lot of work before that was a whole lot better. Now, why is this such a commercial success? So the story goes, Martha Graham responded with this. I like it a lot. Most of you in here know, but go see Mr. Burns, which is next week. So we got a lot of dance in that and a lot of different stuff. So yeah, that's everything from me. I don't know if you have any questions or want to have a chat. I'm here.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I heard you say, when I have the cast, then I can do the choreography. So can you tell the relationship of casting and then doing choreography, or what is that relationship?
Yes. Okay, so for example, go to another slide. This dancer here in the middle, Hannah, has an amazing back. She can do contortion. I can't know anything about that until she's auditioning. Okay, great. Well, what can she do? Oh, she has this incredible arch to her back. Well, let's try that. And you can see there's a movement in there where she's reaching way back. A different dancer couldn't have done that. So in a lot of ways, it's like, well, who do we have? And let me see what we can do. Usually before casting, I knew I wanted 4 dancers. I knew that I wanted lifts in the piece, so I needed people to be able to do that. That was important. I needed people. It's hard, you know, when you have dance on film, particularly when this is during the show, so you can't do any kind of close-ups on the action, but I really needed people who were willing to go there emotionally. So having 2 actors in it just, you know, makes a really, really big difference. But yeah, I think I know a lot about what I want to do, and I'll even have a lot of steps. But at the end of the day, if something looks some way on me and looks differently on Devora, then I'm going to work it for her. So I've said this before, but it was like this is years ago now, that I think some of my best choreography is when I'm heavily pregnant, because I can't physically do it. And so I think there's this pride thing involved where when you're not pregnant, you're like, well, if I can't do it, then I'm not going to choreograph it. So somehow, like, you think that. But once I was like out to here and still had a show, I was like, oh, well, why don't you try a backflip, which is something that I can't do. There was a really big aha moment there where I was like, why do you think you hit? No. So being able to just work with those people, say, try this, try that, try this. And no, I can't do it all, but that's really fun. It's like, put your ego away and see who you got. So that's fun. Yeah. Yes.
I enjoy hearing, you know, the artist's inspiration, and generally in an exhibit or a performance, you don't get that. Mm-hmm. So do you think that adds or subtracts?
Well, it is kind of funny and weird to talk about what I was thinking about. I don't know. It's a different experience. For me, once it's finished, so that. All of that background, where all that inspiration was just to try to get it to a point to where the audience can then watch it and interpret it however they want. I don't mind at all if they have like this whole, they were lovers and they broke up. And, you know, if they're seeing like this full narrative, I'm like, that's awesome. Because maybe that is what it's about. You know, it's somewhere in my subconscious, maybe that's what it was about for me. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about the choreographer anymore. That's not who it's for ultimately. It's definitely for the audience. And it's great for the dancers, too, if they can have, you know, an exciting experience and a transcendent experience when they're in rehearsal and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, once they're up on the stage, at least for me personally, you know, they're there for the audience. It doesn't, you know, if someone comes off and says, oh, that didn't feel good, I didn't feel good. I'm like, well, it looked good and it felt good to the audience, so job well done. So, sorry you didn't have that moment of inspiration, but we did, so it's all good. You know, that's fine. Yeah.
I had the pleasure of observing your tech class yesterday.
Yeah.
And of course you had a variety of bodies and experience and range. And it was quite fun and marvelous to see what you've been speaking about today in play with your folks. Making it as simple as getting past the mere steps.
Yes.
And adding perhaps the most important element of joy and fun and being glad to be there. And that's always quite marvelous to see, and also to see here as well.
Good. I'm keenly aware of how intimidating it is for a dancer who has no training, and they're coming into a class with a dancer next to them who's had 15 years of training. That is really, really intimidating. But if they can just dive in head first and go for it, it's like, I promise you, you will make huge strides. And it's that, you know, we're standing in front of a mirror. We're in front of a mirror for hours and hours and hours and hours. So it's really hard not to constantly be comparing yourself to the other people in the room, which is exactly what you have to avoid. You got to focus in on yourself and the progress that you've made from day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is hard to do. But if you can do that, you know, you make your own progress and you get really, really far, really, really fast. It just takes time. It's Bob Fosse who said, to love dance, you have to love repetition. And that is, that's the key to dance. Yeah.
So when somebody's just learning how to dance, they're supposed to look at themselves in the mirror to see what they're doing? Is that?
Yeah, and so then there's that too, right? So that we live in this world where you're not supposed to stare at yourself in the mirror. You're narcissistic if you do. But in the dance world, you're just doing your job, right? So they talk about having the third eye. So you're looking at yourself through your third eye so that you can see. And of course, for theater people, this is like the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do in an acting class. But in a dance class, you're supposed to look long and hard at yourself. And yeah, you're supposed to look at everybody else through your periphery to see that you're in sync with them and to make sure technically you're working with them, but you really want to try to avoid judging yourself against them, which is, that's a lifelong thing, of course, for everybody. Yeah. Yes.
How does music or sound play a part in both, like you have the steps of what dancers you have and then the music and then the dance comes, like how does it play a part?
Well, like choreographing for musical theater is just a joy for me. Like everything about it is so much fun because the music's already there. Like Oklahoma, I can't bust into some hip hop. I have to stay true to the genre of that play, right? So it very much feels like the dancers choreograph themselves. I hear it, okay, this is in 3/4 time, let's da-da-da-da, we're in this particular style, and it's just so much fun. This stuff is like, this is work where I'm really trying to think about, well, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to explore? What do I think the dancers would enjoy exploring, and how can we collab? So it's a very, very different experience for me. I love both, but sometimes my head hurts a little bit after we do this. I don't know if that answered your question, but so like for these two pieces, I really wasn't that bothered that the music wasn't that loud because there's not a huge connection between the music and the movement, actually. The music is there to help set the tone of the piece, but they're not really dancing. They're dancing with each other. So a lot of that movement was about breath. And like with the physics of a teardrop, there were no music cues in terms of now I do this step, then there are none in there. So they just had to be together all the time and do it over and over and over again. And then they're like, I feel it. I feel the rhythm of this piece. Whereas, something like Oklahoma, the music is just so integral to the success of the dance because, you're telling a story. It was Oklahoma that made dance really part of musical theater in a way that it had never been before. Before, it was just an entertaining distraction to the musical, like, dance break, and now let's get back to the story. Whereas with Oklahoma, now we're into storytelling. Dance is a part of the story. So we have a lot to thank Agnes DeMille for that in terms of dance, because I could easily see it just, and everything being Les Mis. But because dance became such an important part of the story, now we have shows where they're dance shows and there's the music, it's like Broadway shows. So it's interesting how it evolves and the way that the pendulum swings. Yeah, and it'll swing back, of course, but now, just watching Newsies, that's just a dance show. It's an excuse to dance. And that's fine by me. It's great. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here.